Good morning, and thank you for that wonderful choral greeting. This sort of feels like the start of school after summer break. We were together 4 years ago thinking about what will we do in 2016 and what will it look like. And I remember as we would come back from summer break to school, there would always be a discussion of what did you do since we were here last? Wow. We have had a lot happen since the last pre-General Conference briefing. We are here today to talk about the regular scheduled 2020 General Conference to be held in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And so we will be giving you the information about what we will be doing, how did we get here, and a lot of the logistical pieces that you will need to have. As way of background, just a reminder that the number of delegates was set by the statistical data that was received by GCFA. And as long as that number of the formula results in a number of delegates between 600 and 1,000, I, as the Secretary of the General Conference, allot the number of delegates. As has happened for the past several years, that number fell outside that range, and so by discipline, the responsibility to set the number of delegates falls then to the Commission on General Conference. And the Commission on General Conference set the number of delegates at 862 using the formula that was at their disposal. So we will be having 862 delegates. And in addition to that number, we will add those guests from the affiliated autonomous churches and the affiliated united churches who have voice but no vote. In addition to that, we will have a number of ecumenical guests, Methodist family guests, interreligious guests, and a multitude of people who will be participating as observers, whether in the gallery or by the internet. The delegates were chosen through a process of election in each of our annual conferences, and they go through 3 steps in certifying themselves as delegates to General Conference. First is the certification by the annual conference secretary of those who will be primary delegates. A second category, the additional jurisdictional or central conference delegates. And the third category, reserve delegates to the jurisdictional and central conferences. Those final 2 categories serve as the reserve delegates to General Conference in the order of their election. They are certified by the Secretary of the Annual Conference to the Secretary of the General Conference using an official form. Sometimes those forms come in properly filled out. Sometimes they keep going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until they're completed. And we are still in the process of completing the certification of delegates at this point. The ADCA, the Advanced Daily Christian Advocate, is our guidebook for getting through General Conference. For those of you who have been following diligently your social media, or you got a phone call from home that says, there's a brown box at our door, the ADCAs have started to be shipped and have been arriving at different people's shipping address that you provided us while we have been here. The first of those, I think, landed on Tuesday, I heard, so some of you may have them. If not, you have probably found links to get to them online. If you need to do so, let us know in the back of the room, and we'll be happy to help you do that. The ADCA contains all of the reports from the official groups, the agencies, and any of our study groups that need to present reports to the General Conference. They contain all of the petitions that were submitted, whether disciplinary, resolution petitions, or non-disciplinary petitions. And the ADCA is in 3 sections. The first section, Volume 1, is a handbook. The handbook contains the listing of delegates, the seating assignments, schedule, room listings, room layouts, anything that we had available at the time of press. Anything that was not available at the time of press will be printed in the first daily edition of the Daily Christian Advocate. Brian Sigmund, an employee at the United Methodist Publishing House, serves as the editor of the Daily Christian Advocate and is responsible for its operations. He does that in conjunction with the Secretary's office, the Business Manager's office, and the Commission on General Conference. If you are in there and looking around and you've started to fish through the list, you may see that there are annual conferences in which we say, this information was not available at the time of printing. Remember, that was several months ago. And so anything that we receive from then till now, all the way up till May, will be included in that first daily edition of the DCA and will be completed. At this point, we are going to ask Sarah Hotchkiss, Business Manager, to come and talk about a few changes that are coming to the DCA process.
So the delegates have received information that in addition to the ADCA printed, we will be having the content in each of the languages will be available digitally at the new Daily Christian Advocate website, which is www.dailychristianadvocate.org. Primary delegates and reserves will have free access to the DCA website, and others may purchase access via subscriptions. Those subscriptions can be purchased at cokesbury.com. The DCA website will go live on February 3rd, 2020. During General Conference, the reports, calendar items, news, proceedings, and other information from the conference will be published each day on the DCA website. Primary delegates will receive selected DCA content of high importance in printed format daily during General Conference. But these printed editions will not be available for purchase. Free PDFs of the selected content will be posted at the General Conference website. I'm going to talk a little bit about Chromebooks and using it. I'm going to be honest with you, I have enough technology knowledge to be dangerous. So if you have any questions about what I go over, please send an email and I will send it to somebody who can answer what these specific web browsers really mean. So my apologies. So General Conference primary delegates will be provided with a Chromebook issued on site at General Conference to facilitate their use of new online versions of the Daily Christian Advocate. Now, don't get too excited. We do collect them back at the end. And so these selected contents, again, of high importance, will be printed and distributed. However, other content, such as the conference proceedings, will be available on the website only. Okay, here's the good stuff. The DCA website will be accessed on computers, tablets, and smartphones, and the site is designated to work with leading modern browsers. This includes Google Chrome version 79 plus, wow. Foxfire version 72 plus, Safari version 13.0.4 plus. That really does sound very Apple-like. And Microsoft Edge version 79 plus. For optimal performance, because I'm not done yet, we recommend using a device manufactured within the last 2 to 3 years with at least 4 gigabytes of RAM and a screen size of at least 10 inches to make the viewing and use of the website easier. And the reason we express the larger browser size is we've built it. If you've looked at video footage or pictures at General Conference, you will see delegates that will have the Advanced Daily Christian Advocate, the current edition, and then the Book of Discipline. We have made it so that you can see all 3 things on your screen at the same time, so that you're able to look back and see, okay, this is what the 2016 Book of Discipline says. This is how it was originally printed, and here's what's been changed as it came out of legislative committees. So we wanted to, so a larger screen size is better for this purpose. As I said earlier, I know in the excitement about the Chromebooks, they will be only used during General Conference and will be collected back from delegates after the final adjournment of the conference. Some delegates will understandably prefer to use their own devices to access the DCA website rather than a Chromebook issued by the General Conference. We have sent out information about doing preferences if they would prefer to use their own device. And something to know, this is a web-based software, so even prior to coming to General Conference and you're using the website, if you choose to move to the Chromebook on site, you will be able to log in and have all your information that you have accessed prior to that. And then after General Conference, you still have access to that site. As a reminder, the free PDFs of the selected content, as well as the ADCA and DCA, will be posted at the General Conference website, which groups or individuals may choose to print. And a reminder, at cokesbury.com, if you want to purchase a subscription to the new software, you can do that. Now I'm going to turn to Susan, I believe, for the next piece.
So I'm going to be sharing with you about the schedule, because that's what I do. I'm the coordinator of the calendar, and the schedule is part of that. In the advanced DCA, there's an initial schedule that's printed, and it's not very pretty, and it's kind of long. And so in this booklet that you got when you arrived here, there's all kinds of handy information, including a schedule at a glance. So on page 8 of that document, I'm going to turn to that, you'll see a more user-friendly version of the schedule. And I just thought it might be helpful to share with you how that got built and what happens to it over the course of General Conference. So the building of the initial schedule is the responsibility of the Commission on the General Conference, and they begin meeting 4 years in advance of the meetings of the General Conference. So they have been meeting every 6 months or so, all during the quadrennium. And see, I'm so tall that the microphone didn't reach my mouth. But here it is in front of my mouth, so hopefully you can hear me better. So the Commission on the General Conference has several committees, and one of them is the Program Committee, and it's their responsibility to develop the schedule and put together this initial schedule. What they did was they began with the previous schedule that we had and talked about what worked and what didn't work. And so things worked pretty well in 2016 in terms of the way the schedule was laid out. And so for the most part, we'll have the same schedule that we did in 2016. A large part of what they do toward the end of the quadrennium is receive requests for plenary time. So these are individuals or groups who wish to speak to the plenary, and the commission decides who will be allowed to speak to the plenary and how much time they'll have and where to put it. So you will see various special things that are in here. So things like, we have worship in the mornings, which is a nice way to begin our day. We have 2 morning sessions and lunch, and 2 afternoon sessions, and adjournment at 6:30 for dinner, very similar to 2016. The first day, on Tuesday, is sort of our organizing, getting together, getting our act together. Wednesday is when we begin to consider our business and organize the legislative committees. Then Thursday, Friday, and Saturday begin with plenary, but then move into legislative committees. So that's when the legislative committees do their work, as usual. And then the second full week is when we're in plenary. No more legislative committees. I wanted to share a few highlights of the plenary presentations that were approved by the Commission on the General Conference, and they're sprinkled throughout. In that first week, we have the Episcopal's address, the Young People's address, and the Laity address. We have a report on the social principles in the General Book of Discipline. We have a report from the Connectional Table, the Jurisdictional Study Committee, which you'll be hearing about later today, and some information on the retirement plan. These were placed early because they involve legislation that you would be considering in committee. In the second week, we have our usual presentation from Africa University. There are several presentations from Global Ministries, United Methodist Men, several anniversaries. You heard yesterday about the 80th anniversary of, United Methodist Communications, the 100th anniversary of the United Methodist Building. There are several special worship services. And then here's one that is kind of new, and that is on Thursday, May 7th, and that's the first week, there will be Thursdays in Black. And you are asked to wear black on that day. So as you are planning your wardrobe, please be sure to bring something black to wear. Here we have a nice model from our sign language interpreter. But this is from the World Council of Churches. They are encouraging everyone every Thursday to wear black to recognize that we are looking for an end to rape and sexual violence. So I encourage you to go to the World Council of Churches website and search for Thursdays in Black to get more information about that. And that might be a practice you want to take on as we lead up to General Conference. And so now I'm going to turn it back to Gary to share some information about what happens when we get there.
Part of the education and research that we have been doing in evaluating the 2012, 2016, and 2019 General Conference sessions surrounded the area of security and credentialing and registration. And so we have made some updates in the credentialing process that have been approved by the Commission on General Conference, and we want to give you a quick update on those. For those who are participants, you will be registering in one space. Observers will be registering in a separate space. To register for General Conference, you will need a government-issued photo ID, whether that is a driver's license, an ID of some sort that is issued by the state or national government, or a passport. You will need the credential card if you are a delegate or reserve delegate that has been issued by my office, signed by your annual conference secretary, and given to you. So you will need to come to the registration room with your credential card and with your government-issued photo ID. As you enter the room, those of you who are delegates will go in one line. Those of you who are official participants for some other reason, whether you're agency staff, whether you're support in any way in one of our volunteer staff positions, any of those categories, you will have a separate line. There will be individual registration only at each of the registration stations that are manned by the wonderful volunteers from our host committee. They are doing a wonderful job in preparing for that and being diligently patient as we are moving into the new technology that we are still researching, finding, and gathering. So I do thank them for their support. But there will be no group registration. There will be no time when 8 people walk up to one volunteer and try to register together. So each individual delegate will be registering at one time. If there is a need for interpretation, it is not the responsibility of that delegate or that delegation to have somebody speak for a delegate. The delegate will be coming to registration, and if there is a need for interpretation, our interpreters who are provided by the language services under Don Reasoner will be available in the registration area to serve as the interpreters. There will be a newly established credentials assistance office. If there is any kind of issue with getting someone registered, they will not try to fix it right there at the station. We will move them over into another area and keep the process moving since we are having everyone come through that area. There will be photos on the name tag. As you walk up to the station, your picture will be taken and it will print on your name tag. This is a perfect example of why. This has my name on it, but there is no guarantee that I'm the person wearing it. Anyone can wear this, and if you don't know me or the other person, you would not know that I had lost my name tag and somebody else had picked it up and was wearing it. And that is an issue of safety that we have to monitor along the way, as well as preserving the integrity of our voting processes. The Committee on Credentials works with that process and will be coming in a bit early and will be assisting us in a few new ways. Another piece that goes along with the safety that we have been given some guidance and direction by professionals is in the area of seating and being able to determine where someone is supposed to be in an area should there be a disaster. We need to be able to facilitate. We know who's on the floor. We know where they're supposed to be. We know if someone is missing along the way. And so to do that, we will be moving back into our older style of seating where we are at classroom seating, straight across tables, all facing forward. That also will assist us in making sure that heads of delegations can keep better attendance records, because a lot of what we learned in 2019 was a delegate or a delegation that might span 4 or 5 tables, and we have those. The head of delegation may have filled out for the people at their table, or maybe the table that they could see, but they didn't always fill them out for 6 or 7 tables down. And so we need to make sure that the heads of delegations have an easy way to keep track of the delegations and their participation. The room will be broken down into 9 sections, and they will be easily accessible to the microphones that we have placed throughout the room. If there is a need for the primary delegate to leave the floor for any reason, there is the process for seating reserved delegates temporarily. That is not 5 or 10 minutes. That means a full afternoon block or a day or two. If you just need to run out and run back in, we do make sure now, and we have been able to look at facilities where restroom facilities are even available within the secured zone, so you would not have to leave and go to the lobby and come back. They will be in the room with us. You could step away and come right back. There would be no need for a reserve delegate to be seated for a 4 to 10 minute block. You would just step away and come right back. If there is a need to seat that reserve delegate, the primary delegate has to meet them at the check-in table because they have to turn in their voting card to the worker who is there, and the new voting card for the reserve delegate has to be issued, and we don't want both of them active at the same time. So the voting company helps us with that. It is the process we used in 2019. We are continuing it. There will be the services of a professional parliamentarian again at 2020, and he will be on staff with us. It is going to be Lynn, who was with us in 2019. Lumi is back with us with the voting devices, and they will function essentially the same as they did in 2019. There will be more specific training when we get on site, and we will be showing folks how to use that device. There will be pre-general conference briefings for central conference delegates, both in country. Sarah and I will be traveling to do 3 sites of trainings along the way. There will also be an expanded central conference delegate training on site. The General Secretary's table, the Commission on General Conference, and the Central Conference bishops are working together with me to help provide an orientation that is very in-depth on the 2 days prior to the organization of our administrative committees. The delegate orientation for everyone, we looked at how many people were new and how many people were returning, and we feel that there really is not a need to do 2 separate orientations, but everyone can learn the same things at the same time, because if you're returning, there will be enough new things that you might as well just learn it as if it were your first time around. You may think you know how something's going to operate, but it might have changed. And so rather than doing just a first-time delegate orientation, we will be continuing the pattern we had on Saturday evening in St. Louis, where we do a full orientation for all of the delegates at the same time. That will be occurring on Tuesday morning, May 5th. Prior to that, the day before, we will have organized our administrative committees, actually over the 2 days before. That is the Committee on Correlation and Editorial Revision, Courtesies and Privileges, Credentials, Journal, and Presiding Officers. Those committees are named by the Council of Bishops. They are serving throughout the time of General Conference to meet the requirements of each of those committees. We have two others, and those two others, Abby and Susan will be sharing about in just a moment. If you turn to page 27 of the General Conference Guide that you received at registration, you will find an explanation of the legislative process, where the petitions have been received. They will be reviewed by the Committee on Reference. They are assigned to the legislative committees. The legislative committees may or may not break into subcommittees based on their workload. The subcommittees then refer back to the legislative committee. Anything that is voted on in legislative committee is that receives a favorable vote in legislative committee is moved on to the plenary and scheduled for plenary discussion time through the Committee on Agenda and Calendar. Any plenary action is the final action on the legislation. So the more detailed statement about that is on page 27. So talking about the petitions portion of that is Abby Parker Herrera, who I'm happy to say for the first time in 24 years, I really don't know all the petitions. She does. Come on, Abby.
So my job as clergy in the Rio, Texas conference, I start new worshiping communities. So my job usually is to take order and turn it into chaos. My job for y'all is to take creative chaos and turn it into order. I began this process in August. People could start turning in petitions in July. Of course, not many people really did that. The week they were due, I think I started with about 20 in my inbox. And by the end of the week, I had about 1,200 things to deal with or respond to. Many of those petitions met the requirements of paragraph 507 in the discipline, and those were uploaded into CALMS, which is our database for all of those. They were put into the committee that most closely aligned either with the paragraph of that petition or what the petition was dealing with. And those are now published, yay, in the ADCA. Some of those petitions were identical, and so they were bundled together. And if you turned in a petition and you're wondering where it is, it might be one of those that says 10 others were submitted like this. And some didn't fit the parameters of paragraph 507, and those are going to be reviewed by the Committee on Reference, and they will decide whether or not those are valid. You will see 747 petitions in your ADCA. They're divided into the following committees. Church and Society 1 contains 34 petitions. Church and Society 2 contains 73 petitions. Church and Society 3 contains 15 petitions. Conferences, you lucky, lucky people, contains 106 petitions. Discipleship contains 38 petitions. Financial administration contains 63 petitions. Faith and Order contains 24 petitions. General Administration contains 44 petitions. Global Ministries contains 23 petitions. Independent Commissions contains 49 petitions. Judicial Administration contains 58 petitions. The local church contains 14 petitions. Higher Education and Superintendency, I think y'all will be happy, it contains 73 petitions. Ordained Ministry contains 110 petitions. And the Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters contains 23 petitions. Some of you will notice that there are more legislative committees in the past, and you'll notice some lower numbers in each of those committees, and that's to help y'all get that work done. You may remember that we have new requirements in paragraphs 507.10 and 11, and those new requirements require that legislative committees act on all the petitions that are before them. And so we wanted to make sure legislative committees were able to complete their work. So now that the petitions are published and in the ADCA, we'll be calling together the Advanced Legislative Review Committee, and that committee is a team of mostly conference chancellors who will look at those petitions and try to identify any places where they might be ruled unconstitutional. And that's just to help y'all in your work. When you get started, we'll know maybe some places in those petitions that might need work in the legislative committees. The Committee on Reference, I mentioned them earlier, they're gonna review my work. I don't get to do this alone in a vacuum, thank goodness. It was just me hanging out with petitions late into the night, calling Gary with questions, but soon the Committee on Reference gets to weigh in as well, and they will meet before General Conference convenes and review my work and go over any questions that they might have. And they'll meet every day that legislative committees are in session. Every morning we'll meet together to make sure that petitions are still where they need to be, or to hear any requests to move petitions to a different committee, or to help committees that have finished their work maybe take on some new work for others. I think at this point I'm going to turn it back over to Gary.
Those legislative committees, as you will find them in the Advanced Daily Christian Advocate, those numbers are lower, but that is, again, because we did not have all of the delegation selections at that time, the time of press. And so as we collect new certificates of election and new choices are made, we will be adding those delegates in, and you will see the final list of numbers of members of the legislative committees in the first daily edition of the DCA. The other piece that happens in legislative committee is the election of officers. It happens when we organize the groups. A bishop and a member of my staff are there to assist the voting process, but we elect a chair, a vice chair, a secretary, the designated number of subcommittee chairs that we have assigned from our office, and all of those elected officers are required to attend a mandatory training before the work of the legislative committee starts. It's in the rule that they have to attend that training. If they are unable to attend that training, we would have to have another replacement election to fill them in, but we do want to make sure that as we start that work, they are aware of all of the processes that they need to complete as a legislative committee. Because starting in 2016, we now do have those two subparagraphs in 507 that Abby referred to, 507.10 and 11. Everything that has been submitted and deemed valid and assigned to a legislative committee must receive a vote in legislative committee. Everything that is a positive vote must receive a vote in the plenary session. That is not in the rules and procedures, that is in the discipline. You can suspend rules, you cannot suspend the discipline. We have to vote on all petitions now based on 507.10. So all of that will occur in the legislative committee process. Susan is going to talk about, after it comes from legislative committee, what happens in the processing toward the plenary.
So I work with the Committee on Agenda and Calendar, and that is another one of those administrative committees that meets early before General Conference starts and also meets early every morning, not just during legislative committee week, but the entire time. And they have an important job, several important jobs. One is that you saw the requests for plenary time that were printed in this schedule. If there's a request that comes up in the meantime or during general conference, that group would decide whether or not it can be fit into the schedule. And then if something happens during general conference that requires us to change the schedule for the day, the Committee on Agenda and Calendar would decide how that would be accommodated. And that might happen based on a few things we've heard. So that committee will be important in helping us deal with unplanned changes. And then their largest, I think, job is to determine once an item comes out of legislative committee and was supported by the legislative committee, it's printed in the DCA, the Daily Christian Advocate, with any changes that the committee has recommended, amendments, and that's a calendar item at that point, and it can be scheduled for consideration by the plenary. So the Committee on Agenda and Calendar will take all of the items that are available for discussion and decide what order we're going to hear them in. Now, luckily, not all of them have to be discussed on the floor. Some of them go onto a consent calendar. And if I look familiar to you, it is probably because I'm the person that presents the consent calendars each morning. And so there are rules that determine whether something goes on a consent calendar, the amount of support it receives. There are certain things that can't go on a consent calendar, like a constitutional amendment or anything that has financial implications. So anything that is automatically assigned to a consent calendar is printed in the DCA along with the individual items. And then you as delegates have the opportunity, if there's something on a consent calendar that you don't agree with and you want to have discussed, you can fill out a form to have that item removed and submit it to my office by a certain time. And then it would be printed as an individual item the next day and would be available for scheduling. So at some point, the legislative committee officers, the chair of the committee, joins the Committee on Agenda and Calendar, and we all sit around and look at the hundreds of items that are available for discussion and figure out what order those items need to be presented to the plenary in. And that is a giant logic problem, and I love spreadsheets. So I do my best to, have something where I can sort and move and allow them to figure out how to manage this and how we can make sure we meet the Book of Discipline and get everything voted on. And so what we try to do is make sure that every committee gets the opportunity to present. If there are items that are related to each other, that are across committees, we make sure that those are clustered together and are presented in the right order. And so it may look sort of like magic in some ways, and you're scratching your head in other ways about why we do what we do. But that is who determines. It's not just one person. And then that is made available to you each day. I think, the other thing I wanted to mention is if an item is not supported by the legislative committee, and it was an item that was near and dear to your heart, you have the option to fill out a different form to have that item brought for plenary consideration. And so if you get enough signatures and the form is properly completed, that item would be removed from the section that says not supported. It would be printed the following day and then would be available for plenary consideration. So those are the two forms you need to know about if you want to bring something to the floor or pull it off a consent calendar. And that is how everything works. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to share some information about logistics. And logistics sound boring, but they're really important. So do pay attention.
I like spreadsheets too. Thank you, Susan. So as you've heard, there are 14 legislative committees, plus the Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters. Room assignments for those will be announced closer to General Conference. In choosing the rooms, we have to know the number of delegates. We also have to know how many languages we will need in each of those rooms, and that's how we determine which space fits best. Housing assignments for delegations went out the end of December. I know several of you had trouble getting those emails, and so please let our office know if you did not receive for primary delegates and those reserves who are on the delegation list that requested housing. Let us know if you didn't receive that. We are finding creative ways of getting the emails to you. Flight booking is still open for primary delegates to book. For Central Conference delegates, we are booking them as visas are obtained if visas are necessary. Reminder that we only pay for flights and housing for primary delegates. First Reserve clergy and First Reserve lay delegates do receive a copy of the ADCA, the printed copy, and will receive a free login to the website. This is the part of my job that's the tough part. So we've received disappointing information about troubles we are having with obtaining interviews and visas in some of the countries we have delegates coming from, either related to potential travel bans that are coming and/or embassy closures. So please know we take this very seriously, and we work with our contacts in the U.S. government to get more insight and share the importance. And I want you to know that we want all the delegates to come. We want all the delegations to be fully representative. And so if any of you learn of anything new, an article you've read, or if you're hearing things from delegations, several of you have been great about letting us know. Please contact our office if you learn of any of these concerns. We have to be involved in reaching out to the government because we are ultimately the ones issuing the invitation letter for visas. So please let us know. Again, thank you to those who have alerted us. Thank you to the delegates who have alerted us. And we will try our best to see what we can do because, again, we want all our delegations fully represented. But please know we are working on it as best we can. On another note, so during General Conference, you have the opportunity to give back through offerings. So I wanted to announce the offerings that we are doing. The first offering is to support global and local ministries. So half of the offering will be designated towards the Pan-Methodist Initiative on Children in Poverty. And 1/4 of the offering will be designated to Emma's Place Ministry in the Minnesota Annual Conference. And 1/4 of the offering is also to the Spirit Lake Ministry in the Dakotas Annual Conference. We historically do this where we support local ministries as well. Our second offering will be to the advance related to global migration. And then my favorite offering is for our pages and marshals who give of their time and service at their own cost. And so this is an opportunity to give back to them a little bit of money to help pay for the costs of to be there and to be a part of the General Conference. And sometimes we are able to have delegates who are former pages and marshals able there to celebrate their colleagues and work. So that's an exciting piece that we have an opportunity to give back to those various organizations and people. I will turn over now to Gary.
As a music education major with a theology degree, I'm very happy to be surrounded by people who enjoy spreadsheets. As a staff, we are very happy to be surrounded by all the partnerships that support the work that make General Conference happen. We work with a wonderful commission on General Conference, all of them volunteers, lay and clergy from all around the world. If you've ever tried to do a Zoom call with a work schedule on a 12-hour time difference and find a time when everyone can meet together, please now understand why we can't give you an instant answer. We do have to work with those realities of logistics of people have jobs, people like to sleep, people have family time that they need to deal with, and we need to care for them in that way as well. We do bring in a large volunteer staff. They are there. Some of them get their expenses paid, but not salaries. They're there giving up their time, many of them on vacation time from work. And so our thanks to the volunteers who will be coming to deal with all of the work of General Conference that needs to be done, and especially for their families who give up having that person at home for up to 3 weeks. We don't move in for a short amount of time. We move into a hotel. We live there for almost a month. And so it is a very heavy weight that many of the families take on to allow us all to be gone, and I want my thanks to go out to them. We work with a wonderful host committee. We work with the Council of Bishops and the Judicial Council. Especially our work is supported through various activities of all of our general agencies, and they are absolutely wonderful and supportive to provide what we need when we ask in any way, and sometimes are even more creative in how to do it than we understood what we were asking. So especially to the general secretaries and those agency staff, thank you very much. And on my end of it, administratively, thanks to the annual conference secretaries and the secretaries of the jurisdictions and central conferences for their wonderful work in shepherding all of this paperwork that allows us to function together. So thank you, and thanks to them. Here we go.
Yes, thank you all for very helpful information. At this time, we have just a few moments to answer any questions you might have. Again, if you do have a question, please find one of the microphones closest to you and wait to be called on. Sir.
Lonnie Brooks, Lay, Alaska. A question for Abby Parker Herrera. The negotiating team that gave us the protocol have said that their preferred method of introducing their legislation is to have one or more annual conferences that could hold special sessions using the exception clause in 507.6, meeting up to 45 days prior to the convening of the General Conference, to adopt petitions that they would then submit to the General Conference. It's interesting, it would be of interest to know what your plan is for receiving and processing those petitions that come in that manner.
We have been researching that, and if we receive petitions, Gary and I and the Committee on Reference will be talking about that.
Sir, next.
Good morning. Jay Brim, lay delegate from Rio, Texas. We've been having a friendly debate over there about whether the return rate on Chromebooks will exceed the payout this year. So Sarah, I'd like to ask whether or not y'all have made plans to allow people to purchase the Chromebooks at the end of General Conference.
Ooh, I have an answer. Yay. So actually, no, we will not have the option to purchase them. The company that we're working with will continue to work on those computers, and we are able to use them for 7 years, which means that we have more than one general conference that we can use them for. And so the reason we are collecting them back is that we intend then to use them again for future general conferences.
Sir.
All right. Joe Harris, the Oklahoma Conference clergy. I apologize if I missed this. I don't think I did, but two questions that I have is, one, will there be electronic voting in the committees? And two, will there be parliamentarians in the committees?
There will be electronic voting in the legislative committees. That is part of what we have contracted with Lumi for. In fact, they are bringing in extra staff to be able to be in 14 places at once. and support that work. We have to use very specific technology as we use electronic voting devices so that they will not bleed through the partition walls when we have air walls that are closed but not solid walls. And so we do have to take care of that portion of it. The need for electronic voting, if any of you remember, came from the concerns about delegates being told how to vote and being monitored in how they were voting and reporting that back to areas, and in some cases losing their livelihood or finding that they were no longer appointed where they had been appointed if they had voted the wrong way. And some of those allegations had come to us through the Commission on the Status and Role of Women, and we received an official request for that as a way to protect the votes and the ability for those delegates to vote their conscience in the area and not to be monitored. And so it was an action of the Commission to make sure that that was available within the legislative committees as well as within the plenary. There will be parliamentarians in the legislative committees. The rules allow for retired bishops, and then a pool of other parliamentarians is gathered by the business manager, and they are selected by the secretary and assigned to each of the legislative committees. So we do have a pool of people who will be functioning within the legislative committees. The other piece of having the professional registered parliamentarian on my staff is that he is available if I'm not able to answer the question or we have two questions at once in a room that cannot be settled. We are also able to go in and assist in any parliamentary issues that may arise.
Yeah, my name is Reverend Ande Emmanuel, clergy delegate from Southern Nigeria Annual Conference. In an event that a sitting delegate was not able to issue a visa, how do you, what are the things that you need to do to get their first reserve seated?
Could you repeat your question one more time about the visas?
Yeah, there are several of our sitting delegates that are denied visa, and we want to substitute them with their first reserve before arriving in the United States. What are those things that you need to do?
Okay, actually, I think Gary can answer that question because that comes from him first.
The portion where it is, Sarah and I work together on this. We're on Zoom or phone most of every day together. And so one of the projects that we manage is the notification of if a visa is denied for a primary delegate, we move the reserve delegates up. If you will remember, as I said earlier in the certification process, we have three groups that are elected: primary delegates, additional delegates to the jurisdictional or central conference, and reserve delegates to the jurisdictional or central conference. They are listed on the certificates of election in order of their election. And if a primary delegate needs to not be at general conference for any reason, the jurisdictional or central conference delegates move up one position in the order. You don't just reach into that pool and pick somebody. They have to come in the order of election. And so if we are able to hear that notification prior to the purchase of airline tickets, we are able to substitute the reserve into the position automatically and begin making travel arrangements. That notification comes from the secretary of the annual conference or from the head of delegation or Episcopal office and then confirmed with the secretary of the annual conference. If we learn about the change after airline tickets are purchased, the process is different because the delegate whose name is on the airline ticket owns the airline ticket. It is property. We no longer own it. And so it is a process that we have to work through, and Sarah works with each of the individuals to transfer that ticket in some way. Either one pays for it, the other one keeps it. Somehow they have to work that out within the delegations. If we can learn it prior to the purchase of the airline tickets, that is the key.
Friends, we have time for one more question, so we'll take yours, and then I know this team will be available after their panel if you have further questions for them.
Great.
My name is Bethany Amy. I am laity and the head of delegation for Greater New Jersey. My question is in reference, there are several of us that will be bringing our young children with us. Some of them will be newborns, some of them will be infants, some of them will be 18 months, mine specific. So I'm wondering what the provisions are that are being made for us to be able to have our children be brought to us if they need to be fed, if they need to have mommy or daddy time, or primary caregiver time. Do they need to be credentialed? Does your caregiver need to be credentialed? How does that work? Do I need to have them registered prior to arriving? Are strollers allowed on the floor? Because that was an issue for me last time as well. So.
Great, thank you.
So we are issuing a badge that's a pacifier. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. That's a joke.
It's not a pacifier.
I'm kidding. With a lanyard. No. Bethany, thank you so much for your question. The key is, and I've worked with several of some of the new moms that we have, and we have several new moms who are delegates, which is exciting. Yay. Hey. I am a mom myself. They're 10 and 14. Often I act more like a child than they do. So there are several provisions that I have done for some of our new moms. If they are coming with an infant or a young child, we make an exception for their room to make sure that they're able to have the caregiver with them at General Conference and do not have to room with another delegate. And I'm sure another delegate as a parent would appreciate having a different room. So, yes. Yes, strollers are absolutely allowed on the floor of General Conference. There's no question. We are in a normal convention center, so there's no stairs or anything to worry about like we had in 2019. And yes, we do make special provisions for caregivers. As long as I know it ahead of time, we will badge them appropriately and so that they can connect with each other and bring the child to the floor. So there's several things that we're looking at and on the floor as well to take care of the nursing moms as well. But it is very important and close to my heart as a mother of two who nurse both of her children. So I try to take care of you all as best as I can, and I appreciate you letting me know. And I also appreciate the heads of delegations that let me know ahead of time as well so we can make some pre-planning. So thank you so much for that question. And anybody I haven't heard from that is in that situation, please do let me know.